Hi class, we're looking at lesson 2-3, which deals with multiplying and dividing rational numbers. Let's look at the notes for the beginning section here. We have the identity property of multiplication and then the zero property, the multiplication property of zero. The identity multiplication tells us that to multiply any number by 1, we're still left with that number. So if you look at the examples, 1 times 5, what does that leave us with? That leaves us with 5. 1 times -5, -5. Multiplication of 0 tells us that if we multiply anything by 0, it's 0. And we're not trying to insult your intelligence here. We're just reminding you of what you already know. Now, the multiplication property of -1 tells us that if we multiply a number by -1, we get the opposite of that number. So here we have -1 times 5, so we're left with -5. And -1 times -5, we're going to get the opposite of -5, which is +5. Okay. Multiplying numbers with the same sign. The product of two positive numbers or two negative numbers is a positive. So this tells us that a positive number times a positive number is going to leave us with a positive number. In this case, it's going to be a positive 10. A negative number times a negative number, it's kind of like two wrongs make a right. Well, in this case, we get a positive 10 again. Now, if we're multiplying numbers with different signs, the product of a positive and a negative, so they're going to be opposite signs, or a negative and a positive, is going to be a negative. So here we have 3 times -6, which gives us -18, and -3 times 6 gives us -18 as well. Moving down the page, the quotient of two positive or two negative numbers is a positive. It's just the same as multiplication. So we have 6 divided by 3 is a positive 2, and we usually don't write that positive sign. It's understood to be there. And then a negative divided by a negative. In this case, 6 divided by 3 is the same as -6 divided by -3, which is going to be positive 2 again. Dividing a positive and a negative or a negative and a positive is going to result in a negative number. So again, we look at -6 divided by 3 is going to leave us with -2. And then 6 divided by -3 also leaves us with -2. The final property we're looking at here is the inverse property of multiplication. And it tells us for every non-zero real number, and they're calling it A, there's a multiplicative inverse, 1 over A. So it's the flip of the number, okay, such that when you multiply a number times its reciprocal, what's going to be left is the positive 1, okay? So we have two examples here of 5 times 1/5, which is going to leave us with 1, and then a -5 times a -1/5 also leaves us with positive 1. And the multiplicative inverse of a non-zero rational number. Okay, get this going here. And then we have the multiplicative non-zero rational number, A over B, is the flip, okay, is the flip, which is going to be B over A. The nice thing is if you take the A over the B and you multiply it by B over A, it's going to result in 1. Okay, and a reciprocal is just the flip of a number. It's 1 over that number, if you think of it. So the reciprocal of 3 is going to be 1 over 3. Let's move on to the next page. Again, if you're having trouble with some of these vocabulary terms, look at them. And then there are also several examples in your book you can look at as well. Okay, so let's move on to the first few examples in our packet. So we have the first example here, which is multiplying an expression. We have the expression -6 times the fraction 3 over 4. Now, we can look at this and we can say negative 6 is just really negative 6 over 1. And how do we multiply fractions? We multiply our numerators and we multiply our denominators. So we have negative 6 times 3, which leaves us with negative 18 over 1 times 4, which is 4. Now, we're not quite done because we do need to reduce this. And they're both divisible by 2, so we're left with negative 9 halves, which is 4 1/2. Okay? Negative 4 1/2, excuse me. In the next example, we're evaluating an expression. So we have this function here that t equals negative 5.5 times the quantity A over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And we're going to calculate the temperature change as we increase in altitude, and A is going to be our altitude. So we plug in the 7,200 for our altitude. That is going to be divided by 1,000, okay? That's all in parentheses. And then we multiply that by negative 5.5. That's going to tell us the temperature, that how much the temperature is going to increase if we travel up to 7,200 feet. So we can then multiply, again, we're multiplying a negative times a positive. Our answer is going to be a negative, which should make sense. The temperature is dropping as we go up a mountain. And so I'm going to grab my handy dandy calculator over here. And we multiply negative, notice where my negative sign is here, 5.5, and we're going to multiply that by 7,200. And then we're going to divide that by 1,000, which is in the denominator. And we're left with negative 39.6. Negative 39, oops. Again, that's negative 39, okay, 9.6 degrees, which tells us it's going to drop almost 40 degrees if we go up 7,200 feet. Our final, or our example 3 quick check. Notice the difference between the two expressions here. We have the negative 0.2 to the 4th, and down here we have parenthesis negative 0.2 close parenthesis to the 4th. In the first example here in A, only the 0.2 is in front of that, the exponent, which is the power of 4. So here we have 0.2, 0.2. Okay, which is going to leave me with 0.0064, and that's going to be a negative number, okay? Now in this case, the second example, we have the negative 0.2, and that's going to be times negative 0.2 times negative 0.2 times negative 0.2. Which you see here we have 2 negatives, which are going to make a positive, and another 2 negatives, which are going to make a positive. So in this case, we're going to have a positive 0.0064. If you'd like to try that on your calculator, look to your calculator here. Okay, using the parenthesis signs is really important. So here we have example A, which leaves us with a negative 0.0016. I'm sorry, I put 64 there. And then if we parenthesis negative 0.2, close parenthesis to the 4th, that's going to leave us with a positive, okay? Apologize for that multiplication error there. Both of these should be, get my small eraser here, both of these should be 16 and not 64. Not sure what I was thinking. But hey, we all make mistakes, right? It's important when you find them is to make sure you correct them. Okay? So if you were following along Go back through. 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is 16, not 64. Okay. Next example. We're jumping to example 4. Hi class, we're looking at division properties now. And our first expression we have negative 54 divided by negative 9. If you recall from our opening notes, a negative divided by a negative is going to give us a positive. And 54 divided by 9 is 6, so our answer is positive 6. And again, we usually don't write that positive sign there, just doing that to remind you. Now, when evaluating expressions, we have to be very, very careful that we're not losing any signs. So we have the negative x over y minus 4z squared. X is 4, y is negative 2, and z is negative 4. So let's start. One quick trick I use is anytime we have a negative fraction, I move that negative sign to the numerator. It helps to remind me where it goes and that it's not going to be forgotten. Now, I put the negative in the numerator, and then I'm going to plug in the 4 for the x. In the denominator, our y is negative 2. Okay? Then we continue with minus 4, and that's going to be multiplied by z squared, which is negative 4 squared. Okay? Order of operations tells us we have to complete the exponent first, and consider, if we look here, the z is right in front of the 2, and if z is negative 4, we have negative 4 times negative 4, which is going to give us a positive 16 here. We then have that multiplied by 4, and I'm going to do this quick division here. Negative 4 divided by negative 2 is a positive 2. So now I have 2 minus 4 times 16, and 2 minus 4 times 16 is going to be 64. 2 minus 64. If you think back to what we learned about yesterday with our subtraction rules, we can change this subtraction to an addition and change the positive 64 to a negative. So now you have $2 and you owe me 64. So you're going to end up owing me 62 more dollars, or you're in debt, or your answer is a negative 62. The last one is the division using the reciprocal. Here we have two fractions, okay? You can see we have P over R. P is 3/4, okay? And it gets kind of messy if you have 3 halves. You have 3 halves, and that is going to be over negative 3/4. And again, notice how I throw that negative sign, even though it's out front, just throw it up to the top, and so you're less likely to forget about it. Now I'm going to write this a little differently, and I'm going to say 3 halves divided by negative 3/4. What I can do now is I can flip the second one, and I'm running into some other problems here. I can flip this second one over, okay? And I'm left with 3 halves times 4 over negative 3. Okay, with me so far? Now we have 3 halves times 4 over negative 3. So I'm multiplying two fractions. I multiply my numerators. That's going to leave me with 12. And then I multiply my denominators, which is 2 times negative 3, which is negative 6. Now if I reduce 12 divided by negative 6, that's going to leave me with, and I'm going to put my answer over here as negative 2. Sorry, I worked too much on the right side. Hope this helps. I'm running out of time. My 15 minutes is almost up. Be sure to try the skills you'll need and check those. The answers are on Scoodle. Look through the notes. Watch this video a second time if you need to, or parts of it if you're sketchy on anything. And we'll talk in class the next day. Good luck and thanks.